Shall we start to study of Henry VIII and the history of the trust? For the first, I would like to explain the history of the British land system. Since geopolitical relations, England, now Britain, was conquered in 1066 by Guillaume II, who was the Lord of Normandy in northern France. It is called the Norman Conquest. In order to establish royal authority, the ownership of all land was to be vested in the king, and the land was to be divided among the lords and princes in a feudal relationship, and in certain cases, restitution and taxes were to be imposed on the feudal land. The English dynasty fought a long war against the French dynasty called the 100 Years' War, followed by a domestic war called the Wars of the Roses fought by the powerful lords of England. As a result, the Tudor dynasty was established, and Henry VII, the father of Henry VIII, became the first king. Henry VIII was a man who was both praised and disliked. While he was educated, brave, and charismatic, he was also described as selfish, bellicose, and ruthless. His life is depicted in Shakespeare's famous history play, Henry VIII. At the time, he even competed with his enemy and sometimes ally, François I of France, for his stout physique. Notable political achievements include the supremacy of the king independent of the Pope and wars with continental nations. As for the financial situation of the royal family at that time, the royal domain was only 1/10 of the church domain. With these fragile financial resources, the royal family was unable to pay for foreign wars and the construction of an opulent court. With finances in dire straits, financial reforms were planned to make up for the lack of resources. In addition to the dissolution of churches and monasteries with huge assets, confiscation of their properties, and coinage, the government focused on the burden of land, which had been a condition of feudalism, in order to recover royal revenue. This is the feudal land burden. However, at that time, many lands had been set aside as usufruct, and there was no need for feudal land burdens. In the case of use, the truster transfers the land to the trustee, who is responsible for its operation and management, and provides benefits and profits to the beneficiaries. There was no situation where feudal land burdens occurred through the intervention of a trustee. Legally, the trustee had common law title and the beneficiary had equity title, and the beneficiary could obtain individual redress in the Chancery Court if there was a problem. However, the reality of usufruct was not usufruct as it should have been, but mostly an abusive form aimed at avoiding feudal land burdens. Therefore, Henry VIII enacted the Act of Usury in 1535 to prohibit passive usury in which the trustee, who is a front, does nothing. Legally, the Act invalidated the transfer to the trustee, which was a direct transfer to the beneficiary. Since the beneficiary becomes the owner under common law and the transfer is between the trustee and the beneficiary, it became possible to demand feudal land burden. As a result, the positive use of the trustee as an intermediary, which was the original form of the transfer, was affirmed. As an effect of the enactment of the Youth Law, positive use was sublimated into the trust system. Eventually, dual trusts were allowed, and use was elevated to trust. As a result, it is said that the royal family's finances were restored, but there is another analysis. Thank you for listening.